All right, today we're diving into a massive legal showdown from India, a real face-off between the Supreme Court and the government that all boils down to one fundamental question: who gets to judge the judges? So get this, back in 2015, India's Supreme Court did something pretty incredible. It struck down a constitutional amendment. Yeah, you heard that right. Just think about it for a second. This wasn't just some regular law. This was an amendment to the Constitution itself, passed by the country's elected parliament. And the Supreme Court just said, nope. That's a huge deal, a moment of massive constitutional importance. So naturally, this brings up a couple of massive questions. First off, how can a court even do that? How can it just cancel a change to the Constitution? And second, what was so controversial about this amendment that it triggered such an extreme response? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get into. Okay, to really get what happened here, you have to see this for what it was. This was a full-blown constitutional clash. You had the government on one side, representing the will of the people through the legislature and the executive, and on the other side, you had the judiciary flexing its constitutional authority. It was a real power struggle. So here's the lowdown on the conflict. The government passed what's known as the 99th Amendment and the NJAC Act. This created a new body, the National Judicial Appointments Commission. Let's just call it the NJAC. And its job was to appoint judges to the higher courts. But the Supreme Court took one look at this and shut it down. They declared it unconstitutional. And their reason? They said it violated the basic structure of the Constitution. Now, that's a really key concept. It's this idea that there are certain core principles of the Constitution that can't ever be changed, no matter what. So you're probably wondering, what exactly is this basic structure the court was talking about? Well, their whole argument really boiled down to two foundational principles. These were the absolute bedrock of their entire decision. Let's break them down. First up, we've got judicial independence. You know, the idea that for justice to be truly fair and impartial, the judiciary has to be completely free from government influence. The court argued that putting the law minister on this new NJC commission would directly, and this is their word, infringe upon that critical independence. It was a red line for them. And the second big principle, the separation of powers. This is a classic democratic idea, right? You have distinct branches of government, legislative, executive, judicial, and you keep them separate to make sure no single branch gets way too powerful. The court's majority felt that giving the executive branch a formal role in picking judges, well, that violated this principle. It was blurring the lines that are supposed to keep the judiciary independent. Okay, so with those two massive principles as their guide, how did the judges actually land on this? The decision came from a special 5-judge Constitution bench, which is only put together for these kinds of really, really high-stakes cases. And the final vote, it was 4-1. I mean, that's a decisive majority. This wasn't some squeaker of a decision. It was a really powerful, unified statement from the highest court in the land, striking down not just the act, but the constitutional amendment itself. You can see the breakdown right here. It was super clear. 4 of the 5 justices came down against the government's new system. Now, there was one dissenting judge who believed the NJAC was actually fine and constitutional. But at the end of the day, the weight of that 4-1 verdict was just undeniable. All right, so a law got struck down and a major power struggle was settled, at least for the time being. But what about the long-term impact? Why does this case, which, by the way, is officially called the Supreme Court Advocates on Record Association versus Union of India, why does it still matter so much today? Well, this ruling had these massive ripple effects. First, it was a huge defense of judicial independence. It also reinforced that the separation of powers is a core, non-negotiable part of India's democracy. It cemented the court's own power to review and even strike down constitutional amendments. And ultimately, it set a major, major precedent in that ongoing push and pull for power between the government and the judiciary. You know, this quote really gets to the heart of the court's entire thinking here. They saw their job as more than just interpreting laws. They saw themselves as the ultimate guardians of the Constitution and the rights it promises to every single citizen. And that's a role they were willing to defend against anyone, even the elected parliament. And all of this leaves us with a really deep and fundamental question, one that's at the heart of pretty much every modern democracy. Who should get the final say? Is it the people's elected representatives, or is it the Constitution's appointed guardians? It's a tension that, for sure, continues to define the balance of power, not just in India, but all over the world.